Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. How you all doing out there, gang? How were the holidays? Did you pick up any cool tech gifts? Did you see good tech, bad tech, good gadgets? What excited you? What didn't? As always, let me know. For me personally, it was the Oculus Quest 2 that blew me away. I have written many times about virtual reality feeling a little bit overhyped, but I think I might be officially converted now. And if anyone out there does pick one up, before you register your headset, send me a message and I'll tell you how you can get $30 additional store credit for free so it doesn't hurt your pocket too much when you get up and running. And I can also recommend a few games or experiences depending on what it is you're looking for there. But enough about my tales of holiday tech. It's back down to business, isn't it? And I've invited Rich Nanda onto the podcast today. And he's from Deloitte, but he's also co-authored a new book and sequel to the Technology Fallacy. And the new book is called The Transformation Myth. And essentially, the transformation myth takes a deep dive into how companies that are using disruption as an opportunity for innovation emerge from it stronger, while companies that choose to weather the storm, they miss those big opportunities to thrive and often end up getting left behind. So I've invited Rich onto the podcast today to discuss his experiences, his insights, and experiences guiding clients through strategy-led transformations. Not to mention a few key findings from his book too. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Chicago, where Rich is waiting to speak with us. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, good morning, Neil. My name is Rich Nanda. I'm a strategy consultant with Monitor Deloitte. And I lead our practice here in the United States. I've been fortunate to spend the last 2 decades working with our clients in the consumer industry on their large strategic growth challenges. And increasingly, those involve digital transformation. As the world becomes more digital, as we as consumers expect our products and services to more seamlessly exist in our physical and our digital life, my clients are, continuing to have to adapt and evolve how they develop their products and services and engage with consumers. And so I like to say it's a golden era in our profession of being able to advise clients on how to continue to adapt and to grow amidst all this change.
And I'm looking forward to diving into that a little bit deeper with you in a few moments and the kind of work you're doing with your clients and those digital transformation efforts that we're all hearing about right now. But before we do, can I ask that I take you right back before Deloitte and talk about your origin story, where your passion for technology came from, what lit that spark, and what it was that put you on this path?
Yeah. So I'm born and raised here in the U.S., but I'm children of immigrants from India. And my father had always instilled in me a focus on engineering, technology, with a belief that we were in a world, this is even in the 70s and 80s when I was born, but we were in a world where our reliance on technology, understanding of how technology gets applied to the world's opportunities and problems was a critical skill that would, serve me well throughout my career. So I always had this very strong bias in our household to understand the maths and the sciences as academic studies. And again, my very practical father encouraged me, even in my school years, to go find jobs that weren't just ordinary work, but were internships with companies where I could, learn the craft of engineering. So it's really always been in me because of my father's influence. And then just as a citizen of the world and someone who's very intellectually curious, I couldn't help but use that foundation and that my father had put in me throughout my school years in academics into practice. And as an engineer, I worked for General Motors for a number of years and got to see perhaps less digital and more in an analog sense, how technology was making the world a better place in automation and movement. But that's always been something I've been quite curious about. And that's what brought me to consulting and the last couple decades or so.
Wow, what a great story. I love that, especially that intellectually curious mind. And so many people on here that I talk about, everyone's armed with that and wants to ask questions on how things work. And of course, that path led you to guiding clients through strategy-led transformations at Deloitte. So I've got to ask, what is it you enjoy most about it?
I often recruit people to join our team. And the first thing I tell them about why I've done this for 20 plus years now is there's no end to the learning curve. And clients don't engage consultants like Deloitte when the opportunities and the problems they're facing are a matter of routine and they can just copy what someone else has done. They engage us when the problems are truly innovative, new to the world, or new to their industry at least. And so that ability to never have the same situation present itself in a client engagement, even if the underlying conditions have some similarities, every circumstance has been different. Every client's ability to adapt to that circumstance is different. And so your personalities are different. So you're constantly on a learning curve. And that ability to stay sharp and to stay intellectually curious, coming back to the things my father taught me, have kept me very happy and very engaged here at Deloitte.
And on this Daily Tech podcast, I always say that technology works best when it brings people together. But in business and from observations in my own IT career back in the day, I used to see new tech projects actually be used as an excuse to reduce headcount, which always frustrated me. But thankfully, that is changing now. But can you tell me a little bit more about how you touched on this in your first book? I think it's called The Technology Fallacy, how people are the real key to digital transformation. Because I think it is such an important message, isn't it?
It is. I think, your point that it's not about the technology, it's about how people, whether those are customers of the organization, whether they're the colleagues within the company, it is about how people ultimately consume and apply that technology. And companies that understand and appreciate that, particularly with the new and innovative technologies we have today, are seeing that this isn't just about making the back office more efficient, taking headcount out of the back office or operational areas. This is about truly growing a company in a different way. How can we engage customers in net new and creative ways? How can we provide products and services that are enriched with technology to make them better and more useful? And technology is now central to how companies grow and compete and provide value. And that's what makes it particularly exciting. It's also what makes it particularly difficult because many companies, not all, but many companies, have grown up applying technology to non-core areas of the business. And it's not the same discipline when you apply it to core areas of business. The stakes are incredibly high, right? When you're enriching products and services and customer engagement models with technology. And so it's an exciting time, but it's not a simple time.
And of course, you've also released the sequel to that book, and that's called The Transformation Myth. And just to set the scene, what is the transformation myth for anyone listening anywhere in the world? And what was it that inspired you to write this book?
The myth is that transformation is a one and done event.
Yeah.
And in this world that we're describing, where technological innovation is continuous and it's accelerating, and technology needs to be applied to the very core of how a company competes, its products and services, how it engages with customers. One, the stakes are very high, and two, there is no finish line, right? And so this idea of continuous transformation, it requires a growth mindset. It requires different ways of leading an organization, and it requires a different ways of business leaders and technology leaders actually coming together to just be leaders, right? Drop the business or technology from below their in front of their titles. And my co-authors and I, we were particularly struck by how during the pandemic, digitally savvy and mature companies were using their technology prowess and foundation. They had people that were very comfortable with digital tool sets to actually survive and thrive through the pandemic. And that was very interesting to us. So we commissioned some research. We did lots of interviews talking to companies throughout the course of 2020 to understand why that was the case. And sure enough, the companies that have proven to be the most resilient, the most useful to their customers were digitally savvy, and they did do things differently and better throughout the pandemic. And those observations, we wanted to capture them, share them, so that companies could continue to apply those lessons over time in what's certainly going to be a fast-changing and uncertain world ahead of us.
And from everything you've seen over the last 18 months, there's been a lot of changes implemented since the pandemic. We've gone from working from home at scale to looking forward to more hybrid forms of work. I'm curious, how have you seen companies that have used disruption as an opportunity for innovation and as a result emerged stronger, while companies that choose to weather the storm have actually missed an opportunity to thrive? What kind of things have you seen there?
Yeah, look, that's absolutely been the case. One way I like to observe this is actually thinking pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
What were the things that some companies did pre-pandemic that allowed them to thrive during the pandemic? And one of my favorite examples is a company here in the US called Anthem, which is a health plans provider. Essentially, they're a broker between the hospitals and the doctors and the patients. And historically, they've sat on a vast amount of information, medical records, billing records. But that information, that data lived in silos. There was no automation on top of it, let alone any artificial intelligence to understand patterns in the data. And 2 years or so before the pandemic, they hired a chief digital officer, Rajiv Ronanki. And Rajiv came in and he saw this possibility. What if we made all this data interoperable so it could talk to each other? They didn't live in silos. What if we automated how that data moved around? What if we applied intelligence to understand patterns that were helpful to the medical professionals or to the patients? And they made serious investments to get that work done with a vision that in some future state, more interoperable, intelligent data would be useful to the healthcare system. And sure enough, during the pandemic, they were able to do things like find patients who were avoiding the care they needed because they were afraid to go in to medical centers at a time when the virus was prevalent. And they were able to give them nudges to say, hey, you need to come in for this routine service. Otherwise, it's going to create a risk for you. And here's some safe places for you to be able to do that. And that was all because of the investments they made in data automation and AI ahead of knowing that they would be living through a pandemic. And so I do think this idea of investing ahead of a very clear known benefit, which requires bold vision and conviction, is a key ingredient. But it's also, again, it's very hard in the world we live in where every project needs to have a discrete ROI.
And you mentioned a few moments ago that one of the big misconceptions is, especially around digital transformation, is it is a journey, not a destination. But if we zoom out, are there any other big myths or misconceptions around digital transformation that we can finally lay to rest today?
Sure. Again, we talked about one earlier, but that a digital transformation is the job of the chief information or the chief technology officer. No technology function within a company can undertake a successful digital transformation. It has to be the CEO and her or his team in unison, understanding how the business is going to change because of the new technologies that the company is going to acquire and integrate into how they do work. There's a clear myth that IT is going to solve all these problems on our behalf. So we encourage the very top of the organization to have ownership over digital transformation. So that's one myth. And another myth that often happens, you pick one singular technology and you think that's going to solve all the problems or create all the opportunities. We're going to migrate to the cloud. And once we do, we'll be a better, more efficient, more innovative company. Or we need to adopt AI and therefore, we're going to be a more insightful company. In truth, all these technologies have to work together in concert. And the other thing we encourage clients is to really think about a symphony of technologies that are working together to advance the business's interests.
And as the world, and after guiding clients through strategy-led transformations, I'm curious, there will be business leaders listening all over the world. What have been your biggest key findings, would you say?
Let me give you two.
Yeah.
One is that initiating a transformation is much easier than sustaining one. right? Particularly in this world where transformation is continuous. And so going in with a very clear view of what it's going to take to sustain, the resources that are required, the investment, how we're going to talk about the return on investment when perhaps the return is a little less fuzzy or over duration that makes some stakeholders uncomfortable. And so this idea about sustaining transformation and understanding the marathon and having the wherewithal to sustain it. And leaders and teams that go in with this mindset of we must sustain this over a period of time, build transformation as an enduring capability, they tend to fare better. Again, going back to Rajiv's example, many years ahead of getting return on all that data and modernization, there was a commitment to do that. And then the second is that the CEO, right, she or he must lead, right, have a one voice to the marketplace, to the board of directors on why this journey is essential to the company. I'm very fond of what Mary Barra has been doing with General Motors, not because I worked there for a few years before my consulting career, but here's a traditional auto company that is being very clear about an electrified fleet, about a connected and autonomous set of vehicles that will allow the company to double their revenue, not just selling cars, but enriching the revenue streams with all kinds of products and services because of an electrified and connected fleet of vehicles. And she's very, very clear to the marketplace about where they're going and was the backbone, the spine of the company to sustain these transformations.
And I think if there's anything that any business leader or tech leader has learned over the last 18 months to 2 years is that they're going to need to be more resilient, flexible and adaptable to react to market trends and indeed certain situations around the world. So I'm curious though, as the world does open back up, what is it that excites you about the road ahead?
Called it a golden era in my opening comments. And I truly believe we're going to see more innovation for the good in the next decade than the 50 years before this. And the quality of life will be able to lead, will be enriched by digital transformations. The level of growth and sustained growth companies will be able to achieve. The work that people get to do will be improved. So I'm an optimist, right? I see lots of opportunity. Now I know, there's others that see lots of potential issues in a more connected world with pervasive data. You can, see some of those conversations surrounding the social media companies today. And certainly there are watch outs, there are safeguards we have to put in place, responsibility and ethics. But I think all of those things will be managed, because the upside is so great. We have to do it. And I trust that companies and the institutions governing those companies will figure it out.
Well, I've loved chatting with you today. It would be great to get you back on later in 2022 to see how things are evolving. But we began the podcast talking about your origin story, what put you on this path. It's now time to have a bit of fun with you and talk about what was the soundtrack to that origin story. Is there a song or piece of music that has inspired you, helps you get your head in the zone? Maybe it's something you put on those noise-cancelling earphones when you're traveling to conferences, etc. What would your song...
I have a fairly eclectic and broad-ranging taste in music, which maybe as someone who's intellectually curious isn't surprising. But one example, whenever I'm trying to get focused and excited about a particular client meeting or opportunity, is Empire State of Mind by Jay-Z and with Alicia Keys. And it's a song that I always find is about dreaming big, doing big things, and then achieving really big things. And there's a boldness in Jay-Z's lyrics and approach to that song about thinking, doing, and achieving big. And I always take some inspiration in that.
Wow, love that. I'll get that on our Spotify playlist. But before I do let you go, Deloitte is a pretty big website. So if anyone wants to find out more information about anything or any of the topics we covered today, what's the best starting point for that? And also the best way of finding your 2 books there. And I'll get the links on the show notes.
The best way is probably to follow me. I'm on Twitter at Rich Nanda. I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn. And there's links to the books and our associated research on both my Twitter and my LinkedIn.
Excellent. Well, I'll have the links to our show notes and the blog post that will accompany this so people can find you nice and easily. Like I said a few moments ago, I've loved chatting with you. Yes, hearing your stories about experiences guiding clients through strategy-led transformations and the key findings throughout your book. But more than anything as well, of course, your backstory and that great tune to finish the podcast today. So thanks for taking the time to sit down and share that with me today.
All right, Neil. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed the conversation.
So a huge thank you to Rich for sharing his insights, experiences, and a few stories there from guiding clients through strategy-led transformations, and of course a few key findings throughout the book. But over to you. Let me know your experiences with digital transformation and, of course, any cool tech that you picked up over the holidays. As always, email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram at Neil C. Hughes. Pop me a quick DM over there. Let's keep this conversation going. But that's it for today. I'm looking forward to rocking 2022 with you all. So thank you for listening as always. Really looking forward to keeping this going this year. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.